Hey guys, tonight we drift into a land where even breakfast could be a religious experience. You're barefoot on cool stone, awake long before the Nile blushes with morning light. The air smells faintly of yeast, smoke, and something sharply vegetal. Yes, onions. Always onions. Welcome to a temple kitchen in ancient Egypt, where you don't just cook for people, you cook for gods, dead royalty, and the occasional sacred cat. You probably won't survive this shift. You're not just a cook. You're a holy technician, a flavor whisperer, a blade-wielding scribe who knows when to burn incense and when to sear a goose. Mess up the order of prayers while preparing a meal. The high priest might reassign you to the dung pits, or worse, make you help with embalming Dot. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time. It is right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You rub sleep from your eyes as you enter the kitchen precinct, technically sacred ground. But it smells more like overboiled lentils and sweat. The first chore is lighting the hearth with coals stolen from last night's offerings. Ashes are sacred too, which means no sweeping just yet. Not until someone from the purification crew makes the rounds, chanting and splashing natron water, like they're dusting for ghosts. The head chef, a wrinkled man named Menkau, hands you a bundle of herbs. No instructions. He doesn't need to. Today is the festival of onions, and you know the drill. Every dish must incorporate them. Every prayer must mention them. Every tear you cry while slicing them is technically devotional. You take a blade copper, burnished, slightly dull, and approach the clay tray of vegetables waiting to be transformed into divine breakfast. There are no measuring cups, no fancy oils, just instinct, training, and a deep sense that someone very important, and possibly undead, is watching. You start with a gruel of barley and onion, because even the gods need carbs. But it's not just food. Every action here is layered. The chopping, the stirring, the order in which you boil versus bake, each move echoes a creation myth, a celestial balance, a debt to the afterlife. Your first station is near the east-facing wall, where sunlight will eventually spill in like melted gold. For now, though, it's lit only by oil lamps shaped like lotus flowers. The smell of onion hits you hard as you peel the papery skin. It's a ritual in itself, layer after layer, tier after tier. The Egyptians believed onions symbolized eternal life because of their concentric circles. They were used in tombs and offerings, and even placed in the eye sockets of mummies. Delicious and slightly creepy. You rub your eyes with your sleeve. Big mistake. Now you're not just crying. You're borderline sobbing. But no one mocks you. Everyone's crying. Even the old temple butcher has misty cheeks. Onion grief is universal, and in this kitchen, sacred. You carry your bowl of sliced onion to the communal mixing pot. It bubbles beside lentils, chopped, dates, and coriander. Menkau blesses it with a few muttered words, tracing an ink in the steam with the back of his spoon. Then he adds a suspicious powder from a pouch labeled simply for clarity. You've never dared ask what's in it. At the far end of the room, a young apprentice stokes the fire too eagerly, and the ceiling blackens with soot. A priest, not the important kind, just one of the ones who checks for culinary infractions, scolds him for disrupting the sacred balance. Fire should never flare too high, nor burn too low. It's all symbolic and also very stressful. You glance at the day's food list. Porridge for the novice monks, onion loaf for the head scribe, spiced duck for a minor noble's ghost, and a special pottage made with 7 vegetables and whispered intentions for Hathor herself. No big deal, just feeding a deity. Historically, temple kitchens like this were common across Egypt's religious centers. The kitchens were part culinary laboratory, part sanctum, and part bureaucratic nightmare. They had to follow astronomical calendars, seasonal rituals, and daily sacred duties. If a recipe called for goose breast on the 5th day of Akhet, you'd better not show up with quail and excuses. And the chefs? Many were literate, respected, trusted with religious secrets, and sometimes accused of hoarding spices or sneaking bites of the holy bread. Historians still argue whether temple cooks held more political power than they let on. After all, controlling a pharaoh's stomach is almost like controlling his heart. You move to the next prep station, wiping your hands on a linen cloth. A young assistant hands you a bulb of garlic. You shake your head. Not today. Garlic was powerful. Yes, used for strength, for warding off snakes, even as currency, but not acceptable for this feast. Too aggressive. Today's onions must sing, not scream. You mash the bulb in a mortar anyway, setting it aside for the kitchen guard's meal. Even the temple guards get sacred food, just slightly less sacred than the gods, and with fewer spices. Always fewer. Spices dot across the courtyard. You hear a chant begin. Priests preparing the morning offering. Your food, your onion-laced art, is about to be walked in a solemn line to the altar. You add a final pinch of crushed coriander, then stand back. Acolytes arrive in silence, lifting your tray as though it carries gold. And away it does. Symbolically, spiritually, and economically, food was wealth in Egypt. And onions? They were borderline currency. They even appear painted on tomb walls, almost smiling dot as the dish disappears through the sacred archway. You finally sit. Your knees crack. You sip warm beer from a clay mug and stare into the steam rising off the empty cauldron. It smells of onions and old fire. You inhale deeply. Tomorrow it all begins again. Your next task is to prepare a batch of ceremonial onion mash. Yes, that's a thing, and it comes with its own set of prayers. Not just a mumbled thank you, Ra, for this root vegetable, but full-on lyrical verses etched into your brain. Since your earliest training, you start chanting under your breath, timing the rhythm with each slice of your blade. The knife makes a soft shuck sound as it slides through the crisp, white flesh. You're halfway through the 3rd onion when it hits you again. How strange this all is. That a vegetable most people today think of as a topping for burgers or an ingredient to be hidden in soup was once seen as holy. But here, in your kitchen with flickering oil lamps and pungent air, the onion reigns. You press each piece with the flat of your blade, murmuring a line of ritual text as you go, layer upon layer, as Ra circles the sky. That one's your favorite. Feels poetic, even if your hands stink for the rest of the day. To the ancient Egyptians, the onion wasn't just food. It was cosmology, a symbol of eternity. Each layer was believed to mirror the many dimensions of existence: the world of the living, the realm of the gods, the vast duat of the dead. And when you sliced one open, you were literally unveiling the architecture of the universe. With a side of bad breath, they even found onions in tombs, tucked lovingly beside mummies, nestled in baskets, layered in linen. Pharaoh Rameses IV had them jammed into his eye sockets, which feels less poetic and more like the work of a very dedicated embalmer. Still, it meant something that this humble bulb could illuminate the path through the afterlife. You crush the chopped pieces into a thick mash, seasoning it with salt imported from the Red Sea. It's gritty, earthy, and probably good for preventing infections, though that's not why it's here. No, this is a symbolic seasoning. Salt purifies, and purification is everything. A low rumble in the courtyard signals the start of a recitation. Not from your kitchen, no, this is coming from the inner sanctum. The priests are chanting the morning litany, and with each chorus, your kitchen team adjusts its movements. You don't talk, you glide. Even the clumsiest apprentice somehow doesn't drop the jar of honey. One of your colleagues, a broad-shouldered man named Jehuti, begins to whisper a story while cleaning some leaks. They say if you whisper a wish into an onion before baking, the gods will smell it when it roasts, he says, not looking up. You chuckle. And then what? They grant it, he shrugs. If they're in the mood. If not, your wish just burns up. You want to scoff, but honestly, after everything you've seen, ghostly footprints in flour, offerings that vanish overnight, you're not so sure. Magic and superstition cook together in this kitchen like barley and water. Historians still argue whether these onion rituals were actual religious ceremonies or just elaborate tradition passed down to keep the chefs from going stir-crazy. Personally, you suspect it's both. You place the mash into a small ceramic bowl with lotus petals painted around the rim. Then, delicately, you etch a single hieroglyph into the surface of the mash using the tip of your blade, an ankh symbol of life. Not required, but it feels right. The kind of tiny, sleepy rebellion you're allowed to get away with. At another table, an elderly woman is carving onions into flower shapes, her hands moving with dreamlike precision. Each blossom goes into a basket destined for the high priest's luncheon. But again, it's not just decoration. Those carved petals are prayers. They hold meaning, intention, devotion. And maybe, just maybe, they taste a little sweeter for it. You remember your first week in the kitchen, barely old enough to hold a knife. You kept asking why everything had to be so specific, why garlic had to be crushed exactly 4 times, why lentils had to boil at a certain moon phase. Menkau just said, because we don't want to make the gods sad. Fair enough. Sad gods sound like the worst kind. As you rinse your hands in a shallow basin, someone taps your shoulder. A delivery boy, out of breath, holding a papyrus scroll. Message. From the Temple of Sobek, he pants. They need an onion-based offering by sunset. Crocodile priest got sick. You raise an eyebrow. Sobek, the crocodile god, is unpredictable at the best of times. His priests are notoriously picky eaters, too. You vaguely remember a dispute last year when one of them refused to eat anything with fish oil because it offended the Nile. A risky thing to say, considering that the Nile is, his thing. Still, you nod. Time to prep a sacred onion stew. You grab cumin, dates, fenugreek, and, naturally, the freshest onions you can find. They must be unblemished, round, and slightly tear-inducing. It's how you know their divine dot as you work. Your mind drifts to the way people talk about onions outside temple walls. Some believe they protect against evil spirits. Others hang them above doorways, wrap them in cloth, or carry them in their pockets like garlic cloves in Transylvanian folklore. You once saw a man whispering to a raw onion before tucking it into a sick child's blanket. A temple guard told you it draws out the fever. Another said it was to keep bad dreams away. Either way, the kid got better dot by mid-morning. Your stew simmers. It's golden, sweet, fragrant, and weirdly calming. You imagine Sobek's priests spooning it reverently, maybe even complimenting the seasoning before scowling to maintain their divine mystique. You're starting to think there's something to this onion worship after all. The sun is high now, and the kitchen begins to feel like the inside of a bread oven. Your linen tunic clings to your back, damp with heat and holy obligation, but there's no time to rest. A scroll arrives, stamped with the seal of the house, of eternal life, the mortuary complex. Someone important has died. That means one thing for you. Funeral feast. You gather your tools. This isn't a banquet for the living. This is food for the dead. The kind that must last through eternity, or at least until the next offering cycle. Everything must be perfect. Not fancy, but precise, symbolic. Balanced. You trudge across the courtyard toward the necropolis kitchens, your arms full of date. Cakes, pomegranates, jars of beer, and of course, onions. Always onions. The mortuary complex is a strange in-between world. Part tomb, part temple, part storage facility for the afterlife. It smells like cinnamon, dust, old bones, and saffron. A pair of ibis struts across the path as you pass beneath. An arch carved with stars. You're met by a priest in indigo robes, face pinched like a dried fig. Name? He asks. Without looking up, you tell him. He nods, then gestures toward the open-air kitchen. Prepare the offerings. The journey begins. At sunset, you set down your load and glance at the list on the wall. It's inscribed in careful hieroglyphs. Roast duck, onion bread, lentil stew with coriander, figs and honey, 7 sacred spices, 2 jars beer, 1 onion, whole, unpeeled, blessed. That last one catches your eye. Not sliced, not cooked, just whole. Historians still argue whether this was a symbolic gesture or some kind of culinary insurance policy. The uncut onion represented the intact soul. Or maybe it was a bribe to Anubis. Who knows? You start with the stew. The lentils are dusty and dry, but after a good rinse and boil, they loosen up into something thick and golden. You add coriander and crushed leeks, muttering the lines you've memorized. From earth to table, from table to sky, let the soul be nourished, let the body not die. Kind of catchy, in a spooky lullaby way. Across the courtyard, a scribe chants the name of the deceased over and over so the soul doesn't get lost. You stir faster. The longer the name, the harder your arm works. You move to the duck, rubbing it with spices and placing lotus petals beneath it on the clay tray. The lotus isn't for taste. It's symbolic. Rebirth, rising from darkness. Also, The petals smell much better than duck fat. Dot, as you roast it over the fire, a colleague hands you a small jar. 7 sacred spices, she says, eyes wide. Imported from Punt, worth more than your entire kitchen. You open the lid and inhale. Instantly, you're surrounded by a warm, strange fog cinnamon. Myrrh, cardamom, cumin, dried rose, fenugreek, and something you can't quite place. It smells like summer and sleep and memory. Carefully, reverently, you sprinkle the blend over the duck, watching the fat hiss and pop in appreciation. There's a funny thing about cooking for the dead. It has to be perfect, but no one will ever taste it. Well, not in the usual way. Egyptians believed that the Ka, the soul's spiritual double, would consume the essence of the food. So if you messed up, you weren't just ruining a meal, you were starving someone's soul. And if you really messed up, the spirit might get cranky, or worse, hungry and vindictive. You arrange the bread next, shaping it into the form of a papyrus stalk, symbolic of life and knowledge. You add a swirl of onion on top, raw, pungent, and aggressive. A flavor, too. Bold for the afterlife? Maybe, but the priests insisted. They said the deceased loved onions. Your final touch is the unpeeled onion. You choose one that's small, firm, and perfectly round, no blemishes, no bruises. You whisper a line into it just to be safe. Something about peace, rest, and eternal spice. There's a moment of stillness as the offering table is set. No one speaks. Even the birds hush. And then the procession begins. A line of priests, musicians, and mourners glides through the necropolis, moving like shadows through the sand. You step aside as the tray you prepared is lifted and carried behind the body, now wrapped tight in linen and amulets. You wonder if the soul of the deceased is already here, hovering unseen, sniffing the air, judging your stew. Back in the kitchen, you wash your hands in cool water laced with natron. The head priest passes by and nods, a rare gesture of approval. You allow yourself a moment of pride. Nearby, a scribe and a temple scholar are arguing quietly over the meaning of the uncut onion. It's the eye of Horus. One insists. No, says the other, it's the circle of the year. Or maybe the sun god's many faces. You smile, because the truth is, no one really knows. That's what makes it sacred. You return to the fire, roasting another batch of duck for a different funeral. The day stretches long and hot, but the work feels weighty, like you're feeding history itself. And honestly, you don't mind the smell anymore. You've come to love it. The sharp, earthy tang of onions reminds you you're part of something ancient, something layered, just like the vegetable itself. You're back in your usual temple kitchen, scrubbing onion juice off your hands with a mixture of natron and mint leaves. When the scroll arrives, it's tied with blue string, a royal summons. You freeze. That's not just any scroll. That's a direct message from the palace kitchens, the ones beneath the house of life where Pharaoh's meals are crafted like spells, and the wrong garnish could, theoretically, get you entombed. Menkau reads the message, then raises one eyebrow without looking at you. They want onion stew, he says, but yours. You try to act like this is no big deal, but your stomach flips like a Nile catfish. The Pharaoh's son of Ra, Lord of the two lands, divine in form, is apparently a fan of your humble onion stew. which means you're now making food for a living god. No pressure. You travel to the palace kitchens by donkey cart, gripping a jar of your pre-mixed spices like it's a newborn. The sun glares down, and the Nile glitters alongside. The road, the palace looms on the horizon, its white walls bright enough to blind. It doesn't smell like most kitchens. No sourdough, no fish guts, no coal smoke. Instead, the air is thick with lotus, sandalwood, and cooked honey. Inside, the kitchen feels like another planet. Bronze basins, imported cedar racks, glass jars of ingredients labeled in multiple scripts just in case a foreign dignitary wanders in and wants a snack. You're greeted by the palace head chef, a woman named Nefret, who looks at you the way a crocodile might look at a slow-moving frog. "You're the onion specialist," she says, arms crossed. You nod. "Apparently. Pharaoh likes it spicy, but not too spicy, and no garlic. And it must be warm, but not hot." He eats slowly, very slowly. You try not to panic. Instead, you unpack your gear. You've brought your own pestle, your own mortar, and most sacred of all, your favorite onion knife, slightly crooked, worn smooth by your hands, still cuts like a sacred hymn. As you begin slicing onions, you feel the familiar rhythm return, the layered focus. The kitchen becomes quiet, watching. Your hands move faster, slicing evenly, whispering. The old blessing as you go, layer of earth, layer of sky, tears that heal, not make us cry. A junior chef leans over and murmurs, "You always chant like that?" "Only when the onions demand it." You say, "It gets a laugh." A small one. But still, you grind coriander, cumin, dried mint, and rose petal. You salt the onions slowly in date oil until they shimmer gold. The stew begins to form lentils, water, a pinch of fenugreek, a drop of honey. You balance it like a priest balances a scale, judging the weight of flavors, the feel of the heat, the very soul of the dish. Nefret watches silently. Then she says, "Don't overdo the honey." Last time he said it tasted like the Nile tried to kiss him. You try to imagine what that means. You fail. Still, the stew comes together. The scent fills the kitchen, sweet, savory, sharp, and earthy all at once. One of the guards actually hums. Another closes his eyes. A cat appears from nowhere and sits politely near your ankles, as if summoned. The bowl is served in a vessel shaped like a lotus, the steam rising like a prayer. It disappears into the inner chambers, carried by silent hands. You're left waiting, sweating, wondering whether this meal will elevate your status or get you demoted to beet slicer for eternity. Nefret doesn't speak, just wipes her hands and waits with you. She seems almost amused. 15 minutes pass. Then a palace servant returns, expression unreadable. He places the bowl empty on the table. Then the scroll comes. Not blue this time, but gold. Nefret opens it and reads aloud. "The pharaoh is pleased," she says, sounding mildly surprised. He requests this stew for the evening meal, and again next week. And also, could the onion carver prepare a small version for his cat? You blink. His cat? Nefret nods. Bastet's whisper. She's divine adjacent. Only eats warm. Food. She liked the smell. So now you're cooking for a god and a cat. You return to the stove and start another pot. measuring with your palm, listening to the simmering bubbles like they're giving you advice. A little more mint, a lot less honey. Cats are judges. Silent, twitchy, holy judges dot as you stir. A nearby cook tells you a story in a low voice. There was a chef once who added garlic to the pharaoh's stew. Not on purpose. Just a mistake. He vanished. You look up. Vanished? The cook nods. Some say he was transferred to Nubia. Others say he really vanished. Theft? Gone. Historians still argue whether these kitchen tailies were real cautionary events or just exaggerated fables to keep the younger chefs terrified and obedient. Either way, the message is clear. Don't improvise. When your second batch is finished, a small dish is ladled into a copper bowl shaped like a mouse. Apparently, that's Based Its Whisper's favorite dot as it's carried away. You're finally allowed to sit. Your legs are jelly. Your hands smell like glory and onions. Nefret sits beside you, passes you a fig. Nice work, she says. You didn't flinch. That's rare. You nod. Then ask the most important question of all. Do I get to keep my job? She smiles. We'll see how the cat feels after dinner. You're back in your own kitchen the next morning, clutching a still warm scroll stamped with a tiny paw print, apparently. Pharaoh's cat loved the stew, which is great news. Except now every single kitchen boy wants your onion secrets. You can't even reach for the spice jars without someone hovering near, whispering, was it roasted onion or boiled? Did you chant the long prayer or the short one? Is it true the stew must be stirred 7 times counterclockwise under a waning moon? You tell them. It's onions and instinct. But that's not the whole truth, Dot, as you sharpen your blade and prepare for the day's bread shift. A loud crash erupts from the adjacent hall. A sack of flour has fallen or been kicked. You poke your head around the corner and see chaos. Flour dust hangs in the air like temple incense. 2 young bakers are arguing, one red-faced, the other trying not to laugh. Behind them, 3 loaves of half-baked barley bread lie squashed beneath someone's sandal. Welcome to the bread halls. You step into the floury fray, careful not to slip. This part of the kitchen complex is rowdy, loud, glorious. Unlike the silent temple kitchens, here the rules are looser. Bakers curse, flirt, sing badly, and complain about rations like it's a competitive sport. A woman named Merit Elbows passed you, carrying a massive wooden paddle. Out of the way, stew boy, she grins. Some of us have real work to do. You like Merit. She has burned arms, sharp teeth, and once punched a priest for calling bread mundane. She's also the best baker in the district. You grab an apron and help gather up the flour. Ration day? You ask. Worse, she groans. Inspection day. And guess what we're short on? You don't have to guess. Onions? Of course onions, she sighs. When are we not short on onions? The bread quota looms over every baker's head. The temples want thousands of loaves daily, round ones, long ones, sun-shaped, God-shaped, and the highly annoying onion twist that takes forever to get right. And if the flour's bad, if the onions are soft, if the dough looks funny, it's your neck. One baker once tried to stretch his dough with sand to make weight. It did not end well. Let's just say no one enjoys chewing crunchy prayers. You start kneading. The dough is Warm and elastic, the onion paste pungent enough to make your eyes twitch. Merit oversees the shaping. Make it pretty. The gods are picky eaters, and you handle the baking trays. The ovens roar like lions. Even here, in this more irreverent corner of the kitchen world, the onion holds a place of honor. It's mixed into the flour for blessings, carved into the top of each loaf, and sometimes buried under the hearth for luck, or maybe just because someone dropped one in 2000 BCE and the tradition stuck. As you slide the trays in, you glance at the schedule. Today's batch includes temple loaves by 200, worker rations by 500, special loaves for the Feast of the Good Inundation by 50, star-shaped, experimental bread with fish bits by 3, definitely cursed, onion braid loaves. For the high scribe's cat by 2, yep, another cat. Merit's already yelling across the hall. If anyone drops another sack of emmer, I'll have them stuffed and baked like a pigeon. You think she's joking. Mostly. Still, things escalate. A young baker starts teasing a novice for misshaping his loaf, and soon someone throws a ball of dough. It smacks the ceiling. Everyone stops to admire the splatter. Then it begins. The flour fight. A scoop of flour flies across the room like a comet. Someone ducks. Someone doesn't. The air fills with laughter, coughing, and general anarchy. Merit doesn't even try to stop it. She just ducks behind a vat of barley beer and mutters something about kids these days. You get hit square in the face with a flying onion roll. You blink, snort, spit, then you start laughing. The bread holes are loud, irreverent, and wildly inefficient, but they're alive. A pulsing heart of dough and chaos that feeds half the city. You understand now why some priests say these kitchens are more sacred than the sanctuaries. Because food, real food, reaches everyone. Still, the chaos comes with risk. A scroll arrives by messenger. Everyone quiets. Merit wipes flour from her face and breaks the seal. Her brow furrows. It's from the grain overseer, she says slowly. Bread quality complaint. Everyone groans, she reads aloud. Too pale. Lacking divine bite. Missing proper onion ratio. Divine bite? Someone whispers. They mean it's bland, you say. Merit sighs. All right. More onions. And someone go carve a prayer into the next batch, or I swear I'll carve one into you. You're handed a loaf. It's cooling, still soft. Using a sharpened twig, you scratch a simple message into the crust. May the eater of this loaf walk. In matte, it's clumsy, uneven, but it's heartfelt. Back at your table, you prepare a final small tray, 3 loaves, shaped like suns, each with an onion in the center. These are destined for the temple of Amun, to be burned as offerings, not eaten, just smelled by gods. You wonder, do the gods get hungry? Or do they just enjoy the aroma? Either way, your job is clear. Make bread, carve prayers, dodge dough balls, and always keep the onion pile stocked. It's nearly sundown, and you're still in the kitchen. Not because you have to be, but because you want to be. The day's main work is finished. Trays of bread have gone out. The onion stew has been delivered to the palace kitchens. Even. Merit has stopped yelling, but there's one more thing you're planning to do. You've saved a corner of roasted duck. Not much, just a sliver of thigh and a crispy bit of skin tucked beneath some caramelized onion, but it's forbidden all. The same temple food, even leftovers, technically belongs to the gods. Once it's been consecrated, it's sacred, untouchable, even the scraps, especially the scraps. But you're starving, and the duck smells like it was marinated in pure joy. You glance around. The kitchen is nearly empty, lit by a few flickering lamps. You nibble. Just a tiny bite. It is, without question, the best thing you've eaten in months. And then someone coughs behind you. You nearly choke. It's the junior priest assigned to kitchen inspections. Barely 20, face like a judgmental pigeon. He squints at your plate and raises a single disapproving eyebrow. You know that's an offense, he says flatly. You wipe your mouth. Just testing for spoilage. He doesn't laugh. You could be reassigned. Where? Fish gut duty. You shudder. That's uncalled for. He leans in closer. Or worse, garlic ration inspector. Okay, now that's cruel. You sigh and offer him the rest of the duck. He accepts it without hesitation. Hypocrisy is always best served warm. As he leaves, licking his fingers, you shake your head. Temple law is clear, but the enforcement? Inconsistent. Historians still argue whether these strict food rules were about piety or power, more about reminding cooks of their place than preserving holiness. You wash your hands again and sit near the spice rack. Your fingers smell like onion, mint, and roasted meat. You think about all the rules you broke today. Eating sacred. Duck. Using a personal chant instead of the official recipe spell, and slipping a prayer to Bastet into a loaf of worker bread. You're basically a culinary anarchist. And yet, you're still here. You watch the last glow of the sun spill over the kitchen tiles. A few embers from the bread oven still glow. You can hear frogs outside beginning their nightly chorus. A cat wanders in, tail high, hops onto the counter, and immediately starts licking an open jar of fig paste. You don't stop her. You get it. Temple kitchens walk a strange line, half bureaucracy, half divine theater. Every rule matters until it doesn't. Every bite counts, unless you're a cat. Every mistake is dangerous, unless no one notices. Earlier today, a young boy dropped an offering tray. Dozens of loaves went tumbling. Instead of punishment, the priest simply said, "The gods are hungry. Let them eat quickly." But not everyone is so forgiving. You once heard of a cook who ate a handful of figs meant for a funeral. He claimed he didn't know they'd been blessed. They reassigned him to the crocodile pens. That may not sound terrifying, but you've seen crocodiles up close. They do not appreciate overcooked lentils. Still, even the holiest offerings sometimes meet mortal ends. One time, during a summer storm, half the Temple of Ra's offerings were accidentally left out in the rain. The bread turned to soup. The beer foamed over. The onions sprouted. The head priest just shrugged and called it a symbolic baptism, then sent the soggy mess off to the workers' barracks for supper. You still laugh about that one. You lean back against the wall and stare at the ceiling. A crack runs through the stone, shaped like a river. You've stared at it 1,000 times and still swear it shifts shape depending on the time of day. Right now it looks like a falcon. Maybe that's a sign. You stand, stretch, and decide to take one last walk through the storage chambers before heading home. The storehouse smells like dust, spice, and secrets. Clay jars line the walls, each sealed with wax and labeled in elegant hieroglyphs. Coriander, lentils, barley, beer, dried onions, figs, and dried fish. There's a small section tightly locked that holds the forbidden snacks. These are ingredients, too sacred for common use, like lotus root harvested at dawn, or honey from bees raised near the temple of Isis, or onions that have been prayed over by 3 different priests in succession. You sigh, you'll probably never get to touch those. But then again, you did just cook for Pharaoh and his cat. Maybe one day you'll be allowed inside. Maybe one day your recipes will be sung by temple choirs and etched into limestone walls. For now, you whisper good night to the jars, pat the head of the still-licking cat, and return to the hearth to extinguish the last flame. Tomorrow brings new rules, new prayers, and new onions. But tonight, you rest. The next day begins with the unmistakable sound of hooves and shouting. Never a good sign in a temple complex. You're jolted from your sleep mat by the kitchen runner pounding on the doorframe. Wake up. Ceremony at sunrise. We need meat. A whole bull. You groan, rub your eyes, and stretch your arms. Nothing like dawn butchery to stir the soul. Within the hour, you're at the outer preparation grounds where the temple handles large animal sacrifices. Unlike the cozy onion-scented kitchens, this place smells like iron, dust, and hot fur. The bull is already tied near the shaded enclosure, pawing the earth impatiently, his broad shoulders twitching. You join the other assistants, quietly donning. The butcher's linen, apron longer, heavier, stained with years of holy work. This isn't just food prep, it's ritual dismemberment. Every cut you make must follow tradition. Left shoulder first, then ribs, then heart. You don't get to. Just start slicing. First, the prayers. A priest steps forward, face painted with red ochre, voice low and melodic. He chants to Osiris and Anubis, inviting them to watch over the sacrifice and guide the soul of the animal. Then another priest sprinkles the bull with water from the Nile. Not too much, it's symbolic. Not a bath. You hold the blade, feeling the weight of generations behind it. Historically, the process of animal sacrifice in Egypt was deeply ritualized. It wasn't about cruelty, it was about honor. Every part of the animal had a purpose. The organs went to the gods, the meat to the temple staff, the bones for amulets, and the skin for sandals. Nothing wasted. Everything respected. You make the first cut, whispering the prescribed words, from life to offering, from offering to eternity. The blade sinks smoothly. The bull doesn't cry out. That's a blessing. Some believed a loud animal signaled divine displeasure. Silent. Butchery meant the gods were watching and smiling. You work alongside 2 other assistants, carving precise portions for different altars. The lungs go to Thoth, the liver to Horus, the kidneys. That depends on which temple wing has seniority. This weak priest politics are weird. Like that. The ribs are your domain. You scrape each bone clean, place it on a reed mat, and sprinkle it with crushed onion and natron. Yes, even here, onions are part of the ritual. They're believed to neutralize bad energy and prepare the meat for sacred combustion. One of the priests hovers behind you. Remember the order, he mutters. The gods notice everything. You do. First, the back quarter, then the shoulder, then the leg. not because it's practical, but because that's how the story goes. In the myth of Osiris, when he was dismembered by his jealous brother Set, the gods reassembled him piece by piece. The sacrificial process mirrors that divine puzzle. A reenactment through meat. You've been doing this long enough to respect it. But today's different. Today, one of the assistant's new kid, barely grown, gets nervous. His knife slips. Just a little. Just enough to nick a tendon he shouldn't touch. Everyone freezes. The priest steps forward, examines the cut. Then looks at the boy. You've insulted the bull, he says flatly. The assistant's face drains of color. You swallow hard, because you know what comes next. He's reassigned. You watch, helpless, as the boy is escorted away, not punished. Exactly, but demoted to vegetable prep for a month. And not the good kind of vegetables. He'll be peeling garlic until his fingers forget what joy is. Historians still argue whether these kinds of punishments were symbolic or disciplinary. Was it about appeasing the gods or reinforcing hierarchy? You suspect a bit of both. Religion and management, forever entangled. You finish your cuts in silence. The portions are carried off in reed baskets to be roasted over ceremonial fires. The smoke rises in curling columns, thick with spices and seared fat, offering scent instead of substance to the heavens. Nearby, a priest lights incense and mutters a final benediction. May the gods feast well. You hope they do, because honestly, the aroma is incredible. Later, you help clean the knives. Not just soap and water, no. Each blade must be wiped with a linen soaked in coriander and garlic water, then blessed, and returned to its copper sheath. You whisper a tiny prayer as you wrap yours. Not mandatory, just habit. On the way back to the main kitchen, you spot the demoted assistant sulking behind a stack of onions. You hand him a roasted bone wrapped in bread. Better days, you say. He snorts. At least onions don't bleed. You both laugh, but only a little. In the quiet of the evening. As the fires die down and the stars blink awake, you realize something. Preparing meat this way isn't just about sustenance or ceremony. It's a conversation between humans and gods, between flesh and fire, between you and eternity. And through it all, onions. Always onions. The Nile sparkles under the morning sun like a ribbon of melted gold, and you're elbow deep in fish guts. You're crouched on a sloped stone dock just outside the main kitchen compound, where the day's fresh catch has just arrived by reed boat. Around you, kitchen boys and junior apprentices scramble with baskets, clay jars, and wicker nets. Tilapia, catfish, and mullet still flapping are being sorted by species, size, and smell. You've been assigned to gutting duty. A glamorous side of temple life. Your fingers are slick with scales. The air smells like brine, mud, and something sour that might have once been river weed. You slice into a glistening tilapia, not too big, not too small, and start the careful process of removing the innards without tearing the flesh. The priest overseeing the offerings to Sobek, the crocodile god, is extremely picky about presentation. And if there's one god you don't want to upset, it's the one with teeth like daggers and a reputation for digestive speed. The fish slips slightly, and you mutter the short fish cleaning prayer under your breath. From the river to the fire, in your name may it swim no more. Not the most poetic, but it gets the job done. Ancient Egyptian kitchens didn't rely on fish everyday meat. Fowl and bread were more common, but on festival days and river holidays, fish became central, especially when honoring river gods like Sobek or Osiris, who had complex relationships with water, rebirth, and whatever was lurking just beneath the surface. Historians still debate whether fish was considered sacred or simply too gross to be regularly eaten. Some texts suggest priests were forbidden from eating fish entirely, while others suggest they just didn't want to deal with the bones. You got another fish. Then another dot as you work. You notice how each species has its own peculiarities. The tilapia is surprisingly clean. The catfish, slimy beyond belief. The mullet smells like it's already halfway through decomposition. You set that one aside. Next to you, an older kitchen worker named Back shuffles past with a crate of dried fish wrapped in flax. "Watch out for the river bones," he says. You nod. Everyone knows that phrase. It refers to a rare kind of fish. Spine that splinters into dozens of tiny shards and can cause severe throat pain, possibly divine punishment, depending on who you ask. Did I ever tell you the story of the fish that killed a priest? Back asks, grinning. Only 17 times. You mutter. He tells it again anyway. Apparently, during the Feast of the Flood, a young priest ate an improperly cleaned fish, choked on a bone, and died mid-prayer. Some say it was a kitchen accident. Others say it was divine intervention. Still others whisper it was sabotage because he'd forgotten to bless the onions that morning. You're not sure which version is true, but ever since, everyone treats fish with an extra level of nervous respect. You move on to the seasoning table, where the cleaned fish are being marinated. You mix garlic, coriander, dried mint, and because it's mandatory at this point, onion paste. Every fish must be anointed, every flavor balanced. You're preparing 2 trays, one for the temple kitchens and one for the priests of Sobek. The difference? The Sobek tray includes a small bowl of blood-thick sauce made with fermented fish heads. It's pungent, possibly dangerous, but apparently divine. A junior scribe passes by and holds his nose. "How can you stand this smell?" You shrug. "It's better than the duck fat room." He gags and retreats. As you work, you overhear a quiet debate between 2 fish vendors near the boats. "That one's holy," says one, pointing at a strange-looking fish with gleaming blue scales. "Don't touch it," the other agrees. "It's a messenger fish." You pause. You've heard of those. Some species were considered messengers of the gods, fish that could supposedly carry prayers upstream or ferry lost souls across to the afterlife. Killing one by accident, that was said to bring a curse. So naturally, kitchen boys used that as an excuse every time they lost one. Sorry, it was sacred. Slipped away on divine business. You glance down at your own fish. Definitely not sacred, just soggy. You grill a few over a clay brazier for testing. Well, not your testing, of course. You're not foolish enough to eat temple fish on the job again. But you sniff the steam, check the texture, and make sure the skin crisps just right. River breeze drifts through the dockyard, carrying the scent of papyrus, damp linen, and roasting fish. A cat meows loudly nearby, clearly expecting a sacrifice of its own. You toss it a tail. It disappears into the reeds, satisfied. A priest arrives with a scroll. Sobek's tray goes now, he says. You nod, lift the lacquered wood tray and carry it carefully to the ritual boat. It'll be floated upstream to the crocodile pens near the temple gates. They say Sobek himself chooses which offering to eat first. Some say he even winks. Back at the dock, Back leans beside you, eyes on the retreating boat. You know, he says, I heard once that onions were banned from Sobek's personal stew. Said it made his scales itch. You frown. Then, why are we seasoning fish with onion paste? Back grins. Because Sobek isn't the one actually eating it. Fair point. As the sun climbs higher, the fish prep slows. You wash your hands in lemon water, remove your apron, and wipe a bit of sauce from your elbow. You smell like the Nile and onions. Always onions. You're in the prep room sharpening your blade again, because nothing says sacred morning like muttering protection spells over a vegetable knife. Today's job sounds simple. Prepare utensils and clean tools. But in a temple kitchen, even your spoon might be cursed if you're not careful. You're perched on a woven reed mat beside a low table, surrounded by the quiet clang of metal and the soft hiss of a polishing cloth on copper. A dozen implements lie in neat rows before you. Spoons, ladles, skewers, carving knives, scoops, and mortar pestles, each with a faint patina of use and mystery. You select your favorite blade, the slightly bent one you used for Pharaoh's onion stew. You lay it across your lap and begin the ritual sharpening. 3 strokes left, 3 strokes right, followed by a whispered phrase. Not just any phrase. The kitchen incantation for edge holding. May this blade divide not life from death, but meat from bone clean and clear. Kinda poetic. Definitely necessary. In ancient Egypt, tools weren't just tools. They were extensions of sacred duty. Each one was named, catalogued, and, in the case of elite temple kitchens, even blessed. You remember when Meng Kao told you about a spatula once owned by a chef-priest of Ammon. It was said to grant divine intuition. One flick of the wrist, and you'd know the perfect seasoning. Sadly, that spatula was stolen by a monkey in 1302 BCE and never seen again. Some days this job feels half culinary, half magical. And today's one of those days, because tucked in a small leather pouch at the back of the utensil chest is something rarely touched, a spell-carved ladle. You hold it up to the light, squinting at the tiny glyphs etched into the handle. They read, to stir without spill, to soothe the fire's bite, to feed the hungry dead. Lovely, also unsettling. Historians still argue whether kitchen magic like this was real, superstition, or simply a way to keep junior chefs from being clumsy. After all, if your ladle is enchanted, maybe you won't leave it in the soup pot again. You run your fingers along the edge of a copper skewer. It's got a faint green tinge from age and contact with herbs. You clean it gently with lemon and sand, then re-wrap the handle with fresh linen. Some priests believe a frayed skewer handle lets in malevolent kitchen spirits. Others just don't. Want greasy hands? Next up, the seasoning wand. It's more of a stick, really carved from tamarisk wood and used to sprinkle dried herbs with theatrical flair. You once saw Nefret, the palace head chef, use it to flick rosewater over a dish like she was casting a spell. Maybe she was casting a spell. You whisper a quick joke to yourself, wand of parsley. reveal thy secrets. Nothing happens, probably. For the best, you finish polishing the final spoon when Merritt arrives carrying a basket of what appears to be cursed garlic. "Rotten batch," she says, dropping the basket beside you. "I think someone's been hexing the vegetables again." You peer inside. The garlic is soft, squishy, and smells faintly of mildew and regret. Merritt pulls out a small packet wrapped in cloth. "Sprinkle this in the storage room." "What is it?" "Dried onion skin." "With mint. Keeps the spirits out." "Of course." "It does." You take the packet and head toward the pantry, passing under the stone arch where someone long ago carved a protective glyph in the shape of a bird. You've never noticed it before. Looks like a goose wearing a crown. Once inside the storage room, you scatter the onion skin around the garlic shelves, muttering the traditional phrase, "Let rot depart. Let breath return. Let flavor hold." You say it mostly for fun. But a chill runs up your spine anyway. Back in the prep room, a junior cook accidentally drops a ladle. Everyone freezes. It clatters, rolls, and lands bowl up. They exhale in relief. If it had landed upside down, that would have been a very bad omen. Something about soup spoons and spiritual imbalance. The cook retrieves it sheepishly and whispers a quick apology to Isis, just to be safe. Superstition? Maybe. But after the time someone sneezed into the lentil mash and 3 ovens cracked in a row, you learn not to question things. As the sun reaches its peak, you begin assembling the tool baskets for tomorrow's feast. You pack each item carefully, adding a pinch of dried onion skin and a single peppercorn to each pouch for flavor and protection. It's a tradition that's half culinary, half talismanic. You glance at your own kit, neatly arranged. Prayer-carved blade, blessed spoon, seasoning wand, iron pinch tongs, small bottle of beer for emergencies. As you close the lid, you murmur the final line of the kitchen tool benediction. "Let my tools not betray me. Let my fire not forget me. Let the meal reach the gods with joy." You smile. You didn't have to say it, but you always do. And as you leave the room, your knife safely sheathed, the ladle tucked in your belt, you feel ready. The gods may not eat like you do, but they appreciate a well-honed blade. You're ankle-deep in grain dust, clutching 2 wildly different menus, and trying to decide whether you envy the peasants or the priests more. Today, you've been assigned to prepare parallel meals, one for a group of temple scribes and minor nobles, and the other for laborers repairing a collapsed granary wall. Same ingredients, different realities. You glance down at the elite menu first. Spiced goose liver pate barley bread with onion glaze fig cakes with pomegranate. Syrup date wine. Optional side of laughter. Fancy. Now the workers' menu. Barley porridge one. Boiled onion 1-piece dry bread, no glaze. Beer low strength. 1 ladle. Optional salt, if surplus allows, less fancy. You rub your forehead and sigh. The ingredients for both are in the storeroom barely, but the preparation couldn't be more different. For the elite, every detail matters. Even the look of the onion matters. They want concentric circles, roasted to golden translucence, positioned like an eye on the plate. For the workers, they just want food that won't give them intestinal distress. You begin with the porridge. Barley, water, a dash of coriander, and a boiled onion skins peeled, core intact. You leave the onion whole, a small indulgence. It'll infuse the porridge and maybe make someone smile. Ancient Egyptian peasants lived largely on onions, bread, and beer. It wasn't glamorous, but it was nutritious enough to build pyramids. Onions were so vital, they were sometimes paid as wages, which honestly feels fair. You'd work for onions too, if they were this fresh dot as you stir the porridge. You think about how different the two meals are. Yet both are bound by the same ingredient. Onions. Always onions. There's something oddly democratic about that. You prep the elite tray next, slicing goose liver with the precision of a surgeon. A junior cook grumbles that the liver looks like it's judging him. You nod solemnly. It is. You brush it with fig syrup and sprinkle dried mint on top. Overkill? Probably. But nobles expect flair, even if it tastes the same. You arrange the barley bread next to it, brushing the crust with onion glaze that sparkles faintly in the light. It smells amazing. One of the scribes, watching from the doorway, whispers to another, I hear he used divine onions. You smile, but say nothing. No need to tell them those onions came from the same sack used for the workers' stew. Historians often debate whether the elite diet was truly better. Sure, they had spices and wine and meat, but they also had gout, weak teeth, and indigestion. Meanwhile, the workers? Tough, lean, well-fed on fiber and fermented drink. The food pyramid might have built the pyramid. You set the elite tray aside and ladle porridge into simple clay bowls for the workers. No carvings, no lotus-shaped platters, just function. You top each with a boiled onion, carefully halved, not too soft. Not too raw. Back arrives with the beer keg diluted but cold. You smile at him. Did you chant to Hathor this time? He winks. Sang a love song to the barley while it fermented. Should be extra bubbly. You laugh and hand him a bowl. He takes a bite, chews slowly, and nods. Not bad. Could use more salt. Tell that to the gods of rationing. You pass the elite tray to a waiting servant in gold-trimmed linen. He glides out of the kitchen like he's floating. You glance at the workers' tray. Sturdy baskets, simple cloths, heavy bowls. Honest food. You carry the basket yourself this time. At the granary site, the workers are covered in dust and laughter. One sees you and calls out, Look, the onion priest brings blessings. You bow dramatically. Only the finest onions for the finest laborers. The bowls are handed out. A few murmurs of thanks. One man immediately lifts the onion to his nose and inhales deeply, eyes fluttering like he's met a goddess. You stay long enough to hear the first spoons scraping the bowls. It's not fancy, but it's appreciated. On the way back, you pass the elite dining room. You peek in. The nobles are nibbling delicately, barely touching the fig cakes. One scribe is monologuing about grain taxes. Another is trying to remove onion glaze from his robe. You shake your head, give you a sun-warmed bowl of porridge over that any day. Back in the kitchen, Merritt is elbow-deep in dough. How was the field trip? You wipe your brow. Peasants ate like kings, nobles ate like pigeons, she snorts, as it should be. You clean your station slowly, carefully. The day's meals are done, but the story lingers. 2 meals. 1. Vegetable. 1,000 years of meaning. You rest your head on your hands and think, maybe onions really are divine, or maybe they're just really really versatile. The sun isn't even up yet, and the kitchen is already buzzing, not with cooking, but with rumors. Did you hear? Someone whispers as they stack loaves. Someone watered down the temple beer. Another voice hisses back. I heard they used stale onions in the offering stew. You pause mid-slice, holding a perfectly respectable onion. What kind of monster does that? Back leans in from the spice table. A foolish one, or a brave one, maybe both. Merritt marches in, waving a scroll. Quiet, she snaps. This kitchen is under inspection. Everyone freezes. Even the cat stops mid-lick. She slaps the scroll on the table. The high priest of Rhea says the divine loaves were crusty in the wrong places, and the beer was thin as river fog. You wince. That's not just a critique, that's practically a curse. You know what this means. Today is about culinary crimes, and in ancient Egypt, food wasn't just nourishment, it was religion. Ruining a sacred meal wasn't like burning toast, it was blasphemy. And consequences? Real. Historians still argue whether kitchen infractions were punished, harshly or handled with secret warnings. But you've seen a junior chef disappear for a week after he stirred stew counterclockwise on a festival day. He returned quieter, paler, and only prepared fruit for months. You slice your onion carefully, inspecting the layers. Firm, moist, good color. No temple scandal here, but your colleague next to you? His onion is soft, mushy, and he's thinking about using it anyway. Don't. You whisper. He sighs and tosses it out the window. Smart.meryt assigns tasks. You get stew again. You know the process by heart, but today it must be flawless. The proper chant, the exact spice ratios. No improvisation. No humming. No pinches of cumin for flair. Meanwhile, the kitchen scribe arrives to log everything. Every jar opened, every onion peeled, every spoon used. It's like being shadowed by a nervous librarian. You grind fenugreek slowly, deliberately. Then you carefully toast the cumin just enough to release the aroma, not burn it. You remember the old saying, burnt cumin, burnt offering, burnt reputation. Your fingers tremble slightly as you add the onions. You chop them with a precision that borders on spiritual. The pieces are symmetrical, the layers gleam. This is not just cutting, it's devotion. Still, the anxiety in the kitchen simmers hotter than the stew. Someone sneezes. Everyone stares. Bless you, Back says. And the soup? You see Merritt inspecting loaves like a hawk tapping crusts, sniffing middles, checking for crumb consistency. One poor baker offers a loaf that's slightly overbaked. She snaps it in half, frowns, and says, "This feels like an insult to Hathor." You don't even know what that means, but it sounds bad. Then comes the incident. A young assistant, barely 10, carrying a jar of sacred beer, stumbles. Just a splash hits the floor. Just a tiny splash. The kitchen goes silent. The priest scribe writes it down. Slowly. The boy stands frozen, eyes wide, waiting for judgment. Merritt storms over, examines the mess, sniffs the beer, and frowns. Then, to everyone's shock, she mutters, "Could have been worse. Could have spilled the onions." The boy nods quickly. He's assigned floor sweeping for the rest of the day, which, honestly, is lenient. Probably because his mother bakes the priest's festival cakes. Temple politics. They run deeper than the Nile. You return to your stew, now gently bubbling. You taste it carefully, reverently. The balance is perfect. The onions are sweet, golden, and heavenly. You offer a bowl to the inspector priest. He sips, considers, then says simply, "Acceptable." From him, that's a standing ovation. But your victory is short-lived. Another priest arrives with news. There's a counterfeit stew being sold at the worker camp. Everyone turns. Apparently, someone's been mimicking the temple recipes badly and selling them at a discount. One woman claims it gave her sweats from the underworld. You all know what that means. It's time for the food tribunal. Yes, it's real. You're summoned along with merit and back to the hall of dry provisions, where priests judge culinary infractions. The accused cook stands near a pile of spoiling onions and empty beer jars. He looks defiant. "I only used one stale onion," he cries, and the beer was still foamy. The head of offerings glares. Foam is not flavor. You dishonor the gods. The verdict? 2 weeks sorting lentils by hand. No tools. Ouch. As you return to your kitchen, you can't help but marvel at how seriously food is taken here. A stale onion is sacrilege. A watered beer is treason. It makes you wonder how many culinary crimes you've almost committed. You remember the time you added garlic to the sacred stew during the Festival of Silence, or the time you accidentally served the priest's goose liver upside down, or when you let the pharaoh's cat eat the tribute fish. Somehow, you've survived. Maybe the gods are merciful, or maybe they just really like your onions. The late afternoon light slants through the open arches, illuminating specks of flour in the air like glittering ash. You're standing beside a wooden crate marked with a symbol you don't recognize, half lotus, half scorpion, and that's always a sign something interesting, expensive, or cursed has just arrived. Back whistles low. Smells like punt. You nod. The crate's barely open, and already you're catching the dizzying aroma of distant lands. Cinnamon, frankincense, saffron, turmeric, and something spicy sweet. You can't place. Maybe cardamom. Maybe magic? Nefert herself appears from the palace kitchens, flanked by 2 nervous apprentices carrying scrolls. "These," she says, tapping the crate, "are your spices for the equinox feast." You lean forward to peek inside, then nearly stagger backward. The scent is overwhelming, like being hit in the face by an enchanted bakery. You ask, "Do I get to use all of them?" She smiles. 1 pinch per dish. Naturally. Exotic spices in ancient Egypt weren't just seasonings, they were treasure. Imported overland through Nubia or by sea from the land of Punt, they could take months to arrive, and were often delivered with more ceremony than ambassadors some temples had. Entire rooms climate controlled by reeds and shaded cloth just for spice storage. Cinnamon was locked in clay jars sealed with wax. Saffron was measured by the petal. Frankincense was weighed in amulets. And only the highest-ranking kitchen priests got to open the jars. Nefert hands you a long, flat box. Inside are sachets thin, parchment packets, each marked with a single glyph: fire, wind, water, silence. You lift the one labeled silence and sniff. It smells like roses and secrets. Possibly anise. You choose 3 spices for today's trial dishes. Cardamom, probably for a fig glaze. Turmeric, definitely for a lentil pilaf. Wind for the high priest's dinner loaf, because why not? As you work, your fingers tremble. One wrong move and you'll be remembered as the fool who wasted the spice shipment. Or worse, the one who made it taste average. You toast the turmeric carefully, mixing it with barley and onions. The color blooms bright and golden, like Ra's own porridge. The aroma draws even the guards to the kitchen doorway. One says, "That smells expensive." You respond, "Only the air is free today." He nods gravely. Next, the fig glaze. You mash dried figs with honey and add a drop, just one, of the cardamom oil. The mixture darkens, thickens, and sends out a scent so good even the cats pause mid-fight to sniff. Finally, the wind packet. You sprinkle a pinch over the dough before baking. It rises faster than usual. Coincidence? Probably. But no one says it out loud. As the food cooks, a junior priest wanders by and comments, "You know, some of these spices are protected, sacred." You glance up. "Protected how?" He shrugs. "Some gods claim ownership. Saffron belongs to Hathor, myrrh to Isis, cinnamon to Ra. And what happens if you give the wrong god the wrong spice?" He leans in. "Mysterious rashes." You're not sure if he's joking. Historians still argue whether this divine spice ownership was actually enforced or just a way to control trade. But in this kitchen, it feels real. You set the food on the tasting table. Nefert appears again, this time with a tiny golden spoon. She tastes each dish in silence. Then, finally, she says, "The pilaf sings, the figs are wicked, the bread tastes like weather." You blink. "Is that good?" She nods. "Very. Make it again." "Exactly." You scribble down your ratios, measuring by memory and instinct. But deep down, you know you'll never get it exactly the same. Spices have moods. So do ovens. And God's back returns, hauling a fresh crate marked with a new glyph. "This one shaped like an eye with 6 lashes. He mutters, "More spice." You open it to find dried herbs packed in ash. Among them, dried and in flowers. That's rare. "Where did these come from?" You ask. "Temple of Bastet," Back replies. "Special shipment, blessing herbs. Supposedly ward off kitchen jealousy." You chuckle. Too late for that. Still, you tuck a few into your pouch. Can't hurt. You end the day in the storeroom, organizing the spice jars. Some are labeled in hieroglyphs, others in Nubian script, a few in symbols you can't decipher. One jar hums when you touch it. You don't open that one. You mark your personal blends with onion ink. Yes, that's a thing. A strong mixture of onion skin, natron, and water, and tie each sachet with twine dipped in fig juice to keep pests. Await. As you blow out the last oil lamp, you whisper a kitchen mantra. May these spices remain potent. May no apprentice drop them. May the gods remember their favorite flavors. A good spell. Especially the apprentice part. The room smells like travel, memory, and mystery. And behind it all, onions. Always onions. You wake to shouting. Again. This time, though, it's not about beer or burnt loaves. It's about taxes. Specifically, onions. You stumble into the courtyard, still chewing a piece of barley bread, and find half the temple staff gathered around. The ledgers, priests, scribes, delivery runners, and one very flustered accountant, are all arguing over a new decree. Apparently, the High Steward has introduced a measure of divine equity. that requires all temple onions to be taxed. You blink. You're taxing onions? Merritt mutters. They tax everything eventually, even air, if they could bag it. Back appears beside you, carrying a crate labeled onions, for Ra only. He gestures toward the chaos. They want us too. Count every bulb, every skin, even the spoiled ones. You peer at the scrolls. One reads, "Each temple shall remit 1/10 of all sacred onions for redistribution to Pharaoh's divine kitchens." Of course, Pharaoh wants a cut. Probably to feed his cat again. Ancient Egypt had a highly organized taxation system. Produce, livestock, beer, linen, even fish, sauce, were all taxed. But onions? Those were especially valuable, easy to store, easy to count, symbolically rich, and everyone used them. They were as much economy as ingredient. You join the scribe team at the granary storehouse. Inside, rows of onion crates stretch to the far wall. The air is heavy with scent-sharp, earthy, tinged with age and spice. You start counting. 1 crate, 2 crates, 3. By crate 17, your head is spinning, and your nose is running. Do we count peeled ones? Someone asks. Only if they're intact, a scribe replies. What about half-rotten? Quarter tithe. Sprouted? The scribe hesitates. Better sacrifice them. Too complicated. You watch as back peels an onion reverently, inspecting. Each layer like a scroll. This one's seen some things, he mutters. You mark it as spiritually aged. By midday you've reached 93 crates, and your fingers are permanently scented. The high priest of accounting shows up, dressed like a tax god, and begins issuing little clay tablets to track inventory purity. You wonder what purity even means in an onion. Meanwhile, the priests are fighting over allocation. The Temple of Hathor only uses 10 onions a day. They make perfume. Still counts. You step back as the debate escalates. One priest slams a scroll onto the counting table. Another tries to bribe the scribe with a cake. The cake is refused. Tensions rise. Then someone drops a crate. Onions roll everywhere. Downstairs, into the grain bins. Into the sacred fruit bath. One bounces dramatically into a priest's sandal. Everyone freezes. You swear the gods themselves are watching. After a long, stunned silence, Merritt says, "That was the offering batch." The priest turns slowly. You contaminated Ra's onions. Back, always quick, scoops up the nearest bulb and whispers, "Not contamination. Redistribution." A moment of panic, and then someone laughs. Just a chuckle at first. Then more. Soon the whole storehouse is giggling like school children in a spice market. Even the high priest smiles just barely. "You'll re-sort them," he says. "Every one." You do. All afternoon is spent inspecting, sniffing, sorting, and stacking onions. You create piles. Good. Slightly questionable. Prophetic looking. Definitely cursed. The course pile contains one onion that resembles a human face. No one touches it. As the sun begins to dip, the count is complete. The tithe is separated, loaded onto a ceremonial cart, and escorted by guards to the palace kitchens. You and Back sit on a crate, exhausted. Do you think Pharaoh actually eats all these? You ask. Back shakes his head. He probably just stores them like treasure. Or maybe, you add, he's building an onion pyramid. Back gasps. A tomb of tears. You both laugh until you wheeze out as twilight falls. A messenger arrives with a final scroll. It's from the royal kitchen scribe. Neatly written, stamped with gold ink. His divine palateness approves the onion tithe. No spoilage detected. The Wheaton cat is pleased. You pass the scroll around the kitchen dot. It's official. You've survived onion audit. They dot barely dot later. You pass the cursed onion on your way out. Someone's drawn a tiny face on it now. It's smiling. You leave it there. You don't mess with tax spirits. You wake up to someone shouting your name, not from across the courtyard, but from inside your kitchen. That's never good. You roll out of bed, pull on your tunic, still faintly onion-scented, and shuffle into the main hall. It's Menkau, pale, sweaty, holding a scroll like it's a cobra. They've sent us an apprentice, he says grimly, a royal apprentice. You blink, like for cooking? He nods. Straight from the palace. Some noble's nephew. We are to cultivate his culinary refinement and pass down sacred recipes, or suffer direct judgment from the high table. Ah, a noble teenager who wants to be a chef. This should be fun. You meet him in the courtyard. He's about 15, dressed in spotless linen, wearing a belt pouch that likely costs more than your entire family. He's holding a polished spoon and smiling like he invented bread. I'm Seneb, he announces. I'm here to absorb your generational wisdom. You nod slowly. We'll start with onions. He looks confused. Just onions? You hand him a bundle. Wash, peel, do not cry. Spoiler, he cries. A lot. Still, he's not useless. He slices evenly. He listens. He asks surprisingly intelligent questions like, do you chant clockwise or counterclockwise for goose stuffing? And what spice ban was lifted after the crocodile famine? You raise an eyebrow. You read the archives? He shrugs. I have a scroll club. Over the next few days, you show him the ropes. He learns to caramelize onions without burning them. He learns the precise pinch of coriander needed to honor Bastet. He even carves a sun glyph into a loaf with surprising elegance. You begin to suspect that Seneb might actually care. So you decide to show him something special. One afternoon. You take him to the back storeroom, a dark corner few people visit. You open a small wooden chest wrapped in linen and layered with natron. Inside, a scroll. A recipe scroll, your grandmother's, passed down through generations of temple chefs. It contains notes, drawings, and scribbled prayers. Some of the ink is faded, some replaced with newer lines, added over time. There's a smear of honey from 80 years ago. Possibly divine, you unfold the scroll and read aloud to prepare the sacred stew of Ra's delight. Begin with onions that make you weep, not for their bite, but for their memory. Seneb stares wide-eyed. You wrote that? You shake your head. She did, and she learned it from her mother, and so on. You hand him a blank scrap of parchment. Start yours. He does, with shaky hands but serious eyes. Later, you teach him how to embed prayers into dishes without over-seasoning. You teach him the difference between superstitious and sacred. You teach him the secret of the second stir, the one that settles. The flavors just before serving. He watches everything, absorbs everything. Then, one morning, you walk into the kitchen and smell something unexpected. A stew familiar, but different. Onion heavy, yes, but tinged with saffron and mint. Slightly risky, slightly brilliant. Senab turns from the stove, eyes hopeful. I called it layered sunlight. You taste it, and blink. It's good. Really good. You used 3 forbidden herbs, you mutter. I may have. Lightly borrowed from Bastets. Spice jar. You stare at him, then laugh. Menkau appears, sniffs the air, and nods slowly. You'll make an excellent menace, he says. You pass Senab a fresh reed brush. Sign your scroll. He does. That night you sit beside the fire pit, scroll in hand, reading the notes he's written so far. Always stir clockwise during eclipse season. Never trust a cat during lentil prep. The 3rd layer of an onion contains the most truth. Not bad. Not bad at all. You think about all the recipes lost to time, all the kitchen secrets whispered between generations. Historians talk about kings, tombs, wars, but they forget the food, the flavor lineage, the soul of a people wrapped in steam and spice. Senab looks at you and asks, why do we cook like this? You think for a long moment, because stories fade, but flavor remembers. He nods. Tomorrow, you'll show him how to prepare the bread of reassurance, baked only during eclipses, and maybe even let him stir the festival stew just once, and only under supervision. But tonight, you write 1 more line on your grandmother's scroll. Shared knowledge keeps the gods fed, and us too. And next to it, you add an onion sketch, because really, always onions. You wake up early, earlier than usual. Even the birds haven't started gossiping yet. Today is important. Today, you carve prayers into onions. You slip quietly into the temple kitchen. The oil lamps are dim, barely casting shadows. A single clay tray sits in the center of the table, holding exactly 9 onions, each one round, firm, perfect. Chosen not just for quality, but for shape, weight, and symmetry. These aren't just onions. These are vessels. You kneel. There's no fire lit, no boiling pots, no noise. Just the soft scrape of your knife on the sharpening stone and your own breathing. Steady and slow. The ritual begins. First, you slice the root ends carefully, reverently, so the onions sit flat. Then you polish each bulb with a damp cloth of natron and mint to remove the dirt of the earth and the scent of yesterday's stew. This is not cooking. This is offering. The knife you use is older than you. Copper blade, ash handle wrapped in a strip of linen that smells faintly of coriander. It doesn't cut deep, just enough to mark the outer layers with tiny symbols, etched like whispers. The first onion receives a blessing for health. May your body be strong as the stone that holds the sun. The second, protection. The third, fertility, because apparently someone is placing it under their wedding bed. You try not to think too hard about that. Each prayer is short, personal, and somewhere between superstition and soulcraft. The act of carving transforms the onion into a scroll of scent, a letter written in tears and spice. Historians have debated for centuries whether Egyptians really carved messages into onions. No surviving examples remain, but the texts hint at rituals involving layered offerings and symbolic writing. Some even suggest onions were used like amulets, worn, buried, or eaten in specific sequences to align the soul with the divine. You believe it. You've seen a woman hold a carved onion to her chest and cry. You've seen a boy leave one at a tomb and swear he heard his father's voice. You've seen a priest rub one between his palms before a healing. You believe it, by the fourth onion. Your hands are shaking slightly, not from exhaustion, but from the intensity of it all. You aren't just writing, you're remembering. People, prayers, promises. The fifth onion gets a prayer for forgiveness. This one is for you. You don't speak the words aloud, but you feel them rise in your chest. The blade wavers slightly as you etch the glyphs. You inhale the scent-biting, familiar, strangely clean. A kitchen worker peeks in, sees what you're doing, and retreats silently. Good. This part isn't for anyone else. The sixth, seventh, and eighth onions are easier. You let the rhythm take over. Cut, carve, breathe, repeat. Each one nestled back onto the tray, glowing slightly in the early light. Then the ninth, this one's special. It's for the gods. You don't just carve symbols. You carve layers, peeling back the outermost ring, slicing a pattern that spirals, like a fingerprint across the flesh. In the center, you press your thumb into the heart, leaving a faint imprint. Then you whisper, if you're listening, thank you. If you're hungry, I hope this helps. If you're watching, I'm still here. The final onion is wrapped in linen and placed in a small clay bowl. It will be carried to the altar of Hathor at sunrise. No one will eat it. It will sit in a beam of light until it withers, and then it will be burned. You wash your hands in silence. Outside, the kitchen is waking up. Merritt is yelling about missing flour. Back is muttering something about a shipment of cursed lentils. Seneb arrives, excited, holding a new spoon. But for now, you stay still. 9 onions. 9 prayers. You return the knife to its sheath and tuck the scroll of copied blessings into your pouch. As you step into the light, someone asks what you were doing. You just smile, writing a cookbook. They laugh. They think you're joking. But someday someone will taste a stew and say, this feels like protection. And someone will bite into bread and whisper, this reminds me of home. And someone somewhere will hold an onion to their heart and remember a name they thought they'd forgotten. All because you carved a prayer. All because you believed. Because stories fade, but flavor remembers. And through it all, onions. Always onions. Asterisk. The kitchen quiets. The fire dims to a soft flicker, glowing orange against the clay hearth. You step away from the table, leaving behind your tools, your scrolls, your softly gleaming tray of prayers. The work is done. The offering made. The gods perhaps are fed. Outside, the Nile flows in silence. The wind moves slowly through the papyrus reeds, rustling like soft breath against old parchment. The sun has dipped beneath the horizon, and the world is settling. You sit for a moment, letting your hands rest in your lap. You listen to the quiet crackle of coals, the last hiss of water boiling itself away in an abandoned pot. The scent of onion still lingers on your skin, faint now, but there, grounded, familiar. Tomorrow will bring more chopping, more stirring, more mess and motion. But not now. Now, you let the weight of the day dissolve. You feel your body soften, your thoughts uncoil. You've done enough. You've honored tradition. You've left your mark in the layers of something humble, sacred, eternal. You close your eyes. Let the warmth of the kitchen cradle you. Let the scent of earth and spice drift like memory through the air. Let sleep find you slowly, gently, like a whispered blessing carved into something simple and round. And may the gods watch over your dreams, sweet dreams.